All right, Jason Stone. I've got another interview here. It's been really cool to just meet people from all around the world and learn how they use Logos. And so I'm sitting down for another interview. This is my friend Robert out of Alabama. And so he's right down the road from me. And we've got a ton to cover. But before we even get into it whatsoever, Robert, do you mind sharing a bit of context to who you are and how you use the application, the Logos application week to week?
Absolutely. My name is Robert Hatfield, and I am, like Jason said, I live in Northeast Alabama, little town called Grant. I'm the preaching minister of the Grant Church of Christ, and we are a congregation of about 100, a little over 100. And as far as my exposure to Logos, as far as that goes, in 2018, I decided to go to school in Denver, Colorado, at a place called Bear Valley Bible Institute.
Cool.
And there I was exposed to Logos, and that was in 2018. So I've been a user ever since 2018. In my prep every week, it's always going to that software to try to find not only structures in the text or even some word meanings or something like that that helps, bring light to the text. I mean, it's just so valuable. A lot of times people ask me, what's the value in buying Logos? And oftentimes I said, it's like a carpenter that has a new toolbox. He's got all the new tools. And sometimes, that can be a struggle as far as how to use those tools. A carpenter, if he's just a new carpenter and you just hand him a toolbox full of tools, and sometimes they don't even know how to use those tools. It takes time and experience, to learn those things. And the same thing's true with Logos Bible software. And that's something we're going to dive in today as far as looking at some things I think will be helpful.
Yeah, it's like a giant toolbox. And I feel like the theme of my interviews so far has been I use probably 5% or 10% of the toolbox. And it seems like there's like a confidence that needs built to explore new tools. And then you need someone also to kind of show you how to use those tools. And so I'm glad you framed it that way. That's really helpful. For today, we were talking right before I started recording. There's a number of things that we'd like to cover. We'll see if we get to it all. But I know that you want to set the stage for newbies in like how to set up the screen and what are important processes or important things to take note of as you're getting acclimated, getting familiar with the software. So I know that that was one area that you wanted to cover. And then there's I'd call them more advanced uses. Honestly, it's some areas that we haven't dug into in these interviews just yet. And that's visual filters and how to use visual filters to trace themes, whether it's in a particular passage or maybe throughout a book is what you even mentioned before we got rolling.
Yeah.
So you're gonna be teaching me there, and then charts, and then the icing on the cake, or the way we'll bring it home maybe is the syntax graph. So I'm just like chomping at the bit. I'm kind of drooling and excited to get into some of this stuff, especially towards the end because I haven't dug into those in some of these interviews. And so, is there anything I missed, Robert? Is there anything that we hope to cover that you'd like to call
No,
out?
I think you're right about that. I think those three things I think we could spend a lot of time in those three things. One thing I
Absolutely.
want one thing I want to say though is, in most circles, I'm sure you've been asked this several times. In most circles, when you join a group, whether it's on Facebook or it's a Logos group on, just anywhere, a lot of times there's those questions of how do I start using this program? I've spent all this money on this program.
Hmm.
How do I start using this program?
Right.
And I want you to know that I was there at one time. When I was in school at Bear Valley in Denver, it was a required purchase. We had our own little packet, and when I first got it, I didn't know how to use it. It was
Yeah.
just but thankfully we had a class while I was there. It was just on using this software. Michael Hyatt, which is somebody that's on your friends list. I see you and him are on mutual friends on Facebook. Give a good, big shout out to Michael, because if it wouldn't have been for Michael, I wouldn't have had this,
Yeah.
platform level learning. So, and I've taken, beyond that, I've taken what Michael has taught me, and I've reached out to go even further, and that's where I was introduced to John Fallahy at learnlogos.com.
Yeah, I would love to
And
sit down with John. He and I have been emailing a bit. I'd love to If
Yeah.
someone knows him, bug him. I'd love to sit down with him and have him give us a cursor review of what he uses it for in his personal time. But anyways, yeah,
Yeah.
he's a
So,
rock star.
yeah, absolutely. And fantastic guy. And
Hmm.
John's the one that got me into syntax graphs, the little more advanced things, because I'm always the type that I'm okay with the basics, but I want to know the more challenging thing. I want to learn the more challenging things to use in the software.
Well, I feel like syntax graph is up there in not like more challenging to use, but more detailed and advanced features that are inside of the application.
Yeah, syntax graphs takes something that's very complex. If you set it up correctly, it takes something that's very complex and simplifies so you can see the structure of a text, especially in the letters of Paul or any kind of didactic teaching of Jesus.
Yeah, solid. Well, do you want to start at the start,
Absolutely.
start at
Yeah,
the
let's
beginning, start at
yeah,
the
let's
basic level here, and I think the first here, while you're sharing your screen, the first area would be speaking to a newbie and setting up the screen, and then important items for consideration.
yeah. So it's all about, learning your software and learning what's what. I mean, I usually, like I said, try to illustrate it best as a carpenter or an engineer that has a bunch of tools but don't know how to use them. And for most beginners, when you buy a package on Logos and you open the software, this is where you start out. No,
Hmm.
no, no window saying, "Hey, this is how you do things." And the AI feature that's coming, that's available now is making it easier for people, but there's still a learning curve when it comes to using the software. So what I want to do just for a minute, as we talked about, I want to kind of run you through what I think is the basics, and then we'll step into something a little more technical. So the first thing I like to do is when I come into something like this, I just taught a class with a man that you just interviewed, Jim Garnett, and we talked about these simple steps, these 4 simple steps to utilizing Logos. And we did it talking about inductive Bible study, but it's the same premise each time if I would teach a class on this would be the same thing that I would do then. I think it's important to understand the layout of the screen. I know that's basic, but I think it's important because a lot of times when people come to this, sometimes there's this toolbar that's at the top is on the left, and I choose to put it on the top in the settings. But for the most part, you have these things on the left that people just, when you're coming into it, they don't know what exactly all these things, really mean. So I think it's important for us to, look at these things where my cursor is on the screen and talk about, what is the function of these items? You think about, you got the home screen, and that's the most people will be there usually when they open the program. But the next thing that's on the right of that is, it's the resources panel, your library. Where are you going to get your resources? The big magnifying glass usually, is the search function. And then you have the Bible, fact book, documents, and then you have your guides and other tools that you can use. And then you have this one over here on the right of the guides. It's just your tools. It has certain things like concordance tool, sentence diagram tool, other things like that. Now, ignore all this because this is something that I'm going to show here in just a minute. But over to the right of that, you have layouts, close all, and then you have the refresh screen, and then hey, there's been changes to your software in this little where the 2 is. So, but what I want to do today is I want to start here. I think it's important to start here and go to program settings. And why I think it's important to start here is because a lot of times, these things are just going to be default. And I think it's a lot easier if you use certain things or have certain things checked in this program settings. One thing that I'm a big fan of, not only is, this here application toolbar location, here's where you have the option to turn it on the left or to top. The newer software put it on the left. I'm old fashioned. I like it back on the top. But one thing that I really like, it is this little section here where the double click action. I always turn double click action to look up. Now, there's several things here: search inline, select word, but I like lookup. And now, once you have other settings, once you double click a word, it's going to use your lexicon that you have in your prioritized settings or your prioritized books. So that's one thing that I think is important, is being able to do that and changing that double click setting to lookup. Now, the next thing I think is very important.
I was gonna point something out real quick.
Absolutely.
If you open up system preferences, I think this is the case. If you do Control F right now, there you go, the search bar pops up. I wish that search bar would be there all the time. But if you did click, like if you type the word click right now in that search, there you go, double click, triple click.
Yeah.
Yeah, it helps me to find the items that are in settings a little bit easier.
Yeah,
if you do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Search bar. But yeah, go ahead, Robert.
So anyway, so we have the program settings. We're ready to go. Again, there's, if you're a new user, you really have no way of knowing, what's next to, in order to use this software the way you should. So
yeah, as it sits right now, you've just got this toolbox in front of you with like 80 tools, and sometimes you don't even know what the job is.
Yeah.
That's like what I feel like is the most helpful, is to pause and define what the job is before you dive in and like just start clicking around things. But
absolutely.
But yeah, as it is right now, it's pretty overwhelming. You've just got a whole bunch of tools.
Yeah, that's right. And, it can become a challenge.
All right, so where to next? You ready to dive into?
Yeah, what we're going to talk about now is, let's talk about once you hit the resource or the library panel, it opens a screen like this. Now, most time it's people's going to have this look of, either a cover view or a tile view, or sometimes it's even going to be in a list, like a details view. I tend to like the tile view because you get a little bit of both. You get the cover, and you get a little bit of details. But what I think is important here is this vertical triple ball menu. And I think it's important for us to prioritize resources, prioritize the books. Now, when you open yours as a beginner, this is going to be completely blank. But let me explain what this does. That double click setting that we started off with, if you set if you prioritize your books the way that you should, when you double click, whatever book is on the top is going to be, if you click like a New Testament word and it's going to be come to a Greek lexicon, it's going to be the lexicon that's at the top of this list that's going to open up. It just makes it so convenient, rather than right clicking and going to the right click menu. It just makes it so convenient just to double click that word. Right there I am. I mean, 50% of it is word studies, and if I can make that easier, then that makes it a whole lot better. So what I do is I usually do this in categories. So what I do is, you can tell there's a pattern here that I do to this. The first two things is my Bible. And what I do is set up two translations. And what this is, hey, this is the translation I study from. And this is another translation that I find equivalent, or I like to reference to see how maybe they translate it. You could put anything you want. You could put NIV at the top if that's the translation that you study from, and then you can have another translation underneath it. Now, by doing this, let me show you how to do it. Whenever you come here, you don't have that, so you can just type in NASB at the search menu at the top up here. And what you would do is just take this and you would hold the click and you would just drag it over to this area, and you'll see where it shows up with that black line. And what that would do is it's going to drop that in that menu, and it's going to put that on this list. So, and then here you have the option of dropping it and clicking it and moving it up and down and so forth. So what I do is, you notice there's categories here. The first two are Bible. Notice, Jason, the next two are Greek lexicons. And then, actually, the next three, Word Study of the New Testament by Zodhiates, BDAG, Lonida, and Word Studies of the Old Testament Dictionary by, I can't remember the author's name, but it's by the same company that did the Word Study Dictionary of the New Testament by Zodhiates. And then you have Halot, it's the one that is recognized in most circles, or most scholarly circles. And so this is the way I set this up. I mean, this is, people don't realize this right here automatically just sets the screen up to make other things that you're going to do a lot easier. It's kind of like, making sure that your batteries are charged in your tools before you go to use power tools. I mean, these things are going to help out later on down the line. So let's just look into this a little bit. So let me show you, for example, let's go to our Bible from the top here. I'm just going to open a passage. Let's just open up Matthew.
You already demonstrated what a prioritized resource looks like.
That's right.
Because if you change your NASB 95 as your top prioritized Bible, then that quick link right there to Bible is going to change to whatever you end up doing there.
That's right. Correct. Now, let's just take, we're in a simple passage, Great Commission, everybody knows it. Matthew 28, 18 through 20. Now, remember at the first, we went in and we changed our setting to double click. So let's just say, hey, I'm coming here and I want to look at this word authority. And I'm wanting to understand the word authority a lot better. So what I would do is just double click it, and notice what happens. It automatically opened up. Now, some folks don't see what's going on the screen, because notice that there's some here that's already highlighted. Let me show you just for a second. When you go up to I call them the visual filter, or some people call them the cannonball menu. Or just click that and have these two things checked. Emphasize active lemmas and emphasize active references. Now, what that does, it shows you how that word is being used in that context. And I think that's important. A lot of times there's a lot of information here. And preachers know and pastors know every week that time is a thing that they have to utilize. They have to be careful with how they use their time. And if we can just cut down seconds, even minutes, I mean, without that emphasize active reference or lemmas, I mean, you could go through this whole thing and look and be like, where's the semantic range? Which one of these definitions fit that word for exousia?
You have to read through the whole thing.
Absolutely. So you have that. And so that makes it so much easier as far as, hey, just from double clicking, I'm able to, look at exousia. I'm able to go over to a Word document and say, hey, I've got my word studies in Matthew 28. Hey, this is 28:18. This is one of the words I want to point out in my sermon. And then, you can build up off of that. But also what's fascinating is, you get not only at the top of this is the reason I like using Zodhiates. It talks about how this word is made up. Like what What Greek words make up the word exousia? And it really helps. It kind of just simplifies it down. Let me show you an example of this a little bit clearer. Matthew 19, and we're going to go down to verses 27 through 30. And I was doing a study on this the other day, and I was looking at this idea, the disciples' reward. And this word, regeneration, is something that is so fascinating to me. Peter talks about it in his sermon in Acts chapter 3 and verse 21. But you notice this word regeneration. And I want to double click that, and it's going to pop up what this word, and it's, it's this huge Greek word, palagenesia. You know what I mean? Palagenesia. And you're like, well, what does that mean? Well, it's made up of two words. It's a compound word, and it's made up of again, which is palin, and then you have genesis, which is generation. So basically what he's saying there is, the thing that's going to happen is going to be, Genesis again, talking about what's coming forward, what to look forward to in the when Jesus returns. Restoration of all things, that idea. So, that's why this Word Studies in New Testament Dictionary by Zodhiates is so valuable. It talks about, even right here, occurs in Matthew 19:28, which refers to the coming state of the whole creation. Same thing that's mentioned in Revelation chapter 21 and 22. Same thing that Peter spoke of in Acts chapter 3 and verse 21, when he talked about the restoration of all things and the regeneration. So it talks about how it's synonymous with this, the renewing, this idea of restitution. I mean, it's just so valuable. And when you do this is when people that really enjoy expository preaching, these kinds of things just really jump off the page.
Right.
People just love to see things like this and say, wow, I never would, regeneration, that's in our English language. I mean, that just, we don't really know exactly what's, we have so many different definitions, but what did Jesus mean when he said this word? And this gives us a tool to be able to find that. Mm-hmm. Now, before I move on, I want to kind of dive in a little bit into BDAG. Now, BDAG is a Greek lexicon. It's called Bauer, Danker, Art, and Gingrich. And what I think is important about BDAG is because in most scholarly circles, it's referenced. I mean, most books that you read, any kind of theology books or anything like that, it's referenced to help give them some kind of definition or to help understand a word. So in order to do that, we're going to have to right click. And it's going to bring up the...
Yeah, and I noticed you didn't prioritize BDAG, if I remember right. Is that right?
I did put it on the list, but notice here, even on this screen, there's things that you're going to have to understand. Like right here, I right clicked, and you can right click at home or whatever you do after you watch this, and you're going to be like, wow, I've got all this stuff. Which one of these things is the most useful? Now, in order to understand this, you have to kind of understand, kind of like the same thing we did the first. Hey, what's some of these things? What's some of these things that's on this menu? What's the most valuable? Where can I get the most bang for my buck here? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I just want to take a second and talk about that. Like this line right here is, just the manuscript. And then when you come to this circle, it's the lemma. The Logos calls it lemma, which is the lexical form of that word, how it's being used in that text. And then the square root sign here is the root. What root words make up this word? And in order to get your definition, you have to click the lemma, which is the round circle. And notice on the right, if you go down here to look up, notice what is in line. Remember, Jason, when we set up those prioritized resources? We had Word Study Dictionary in the New Testament. The next one that was on the list was BDAG. And then underneath BDAG was Lonida. Now, these other two are just going to be on there for default. They just automatically show up. So let's go into BDAG. Now, when most people, and I'm sure you've had this discussed before to you or asked to you before, when most people open BDAG, it looks like this. It looks like, wow, I've got all this material. How am I going to narrow everything down? And I think it's important for us to go to this visual filters and look at what is checked. Obviously, anytime I have a lexicon, I want to use this emphasize active lemmas, emphasize active references. That way, when I go down here, I can see the verse that's highlighted of how the word's being used. Now, one thing that I like doing on most lexicon is this. I want to use highlight formatting. It just makes it so much easier to read the information that's at hand here. So notice outline formatting. Notice what happens here. We have this semantic range. We have all these different meanings, but we have, this is the first way that this word's being used. And then kind of like a second bucket or a second nuance, you have this word. And, which one of these fits the way that Jesus is using it? And obviously right here, Matthew 19:28 is being used in this first semantic range, this first definition. So I think that's important because, now we have two lexicons that we're obviously understanding what's the word mean. I mean, it's there. I mean, it's making this tool, you can utilize this tool and it makes it user friendly once you have just those settings turned on. So I think that's where, that's a good beginning. If you can go to a Bible and you can look at, 50%, even some even would say 65 to 75% of their study is word studies. I mean, it is. That's the most valuable thing that most folks would say about the Logos Bible software is it's able.
And I like that you simplified it. I like that you didn't go to, I mean, you can go to like the word study tool, or you can go to a workflow, or you could really dig into it, but to simply have your prioritized Bible and then your prioritized lexicon, and to do a double click and be able to get to that in the Old Testament or the New Testament is a solid, simple process for someone who is just getting acclimated with the software. So
absolutely. Really, and with those prioritized resources, no matter if you're in the Old Testament, whether you're in the New Testament, no matter which one you're in, I mean, having those prioritized resources, it's going to open up just like we did with this New Testament word. I mean, so it's
that's awesome.
It makes it simple. I mean, it really does. It gives and this is the same thing. Let's just say, for instance, we just change translations and we go to the English Standard Version, and we look here at this word that Jesus uses in Matthew 19, verse 28. Truly I say to you, in the New World, notice how the translation changes in the New World, but if you right-click it, you have this same thing, palingenesia. And it's this word that's being used for regeneration. They just choose to translate it. But same thing. If I double-click it, boom. It doesn't change from translation. If you set those prioritized resources up, those things are going to work with any translation. It's just going to make the software so much easier. That's awesome. That's the one thing that people buy this software for, is to do word studies, to understand the language so much, much more clear. And that's one thing this software does. So
solid.
Yeah.
You ready to jump into?
Let's talk.
Some may say are a little bit more advanced,
absolutely
visual filters.
Let's step into the realm of a little more advanced. So, if we're back at our home screen, I want us to look at something real quick. I want us to look at a tool that's in your tools menu that is called Concordance. Now, what happens, and it may happen today, it may take a while to generate, but it's not going to do me that way.
It may choose the index.
Sometimes it does sometimes when you open it, it's going to take this thing, it's going to say generating. It's going to take just a few minutes depending on what kind of software or what kind of hardware you have, it depends on how long that's going to take. So I'm running on a MacBook. But one thing that I want us to look at is here on this line, we have NASB, root, all passages. And what we're going to do is we have to make sure that this thing right here is set to the right book. So we're going to click this and we're going to go to the Gospel of John. Now notice what happens. It's going to give you an example of what words is being used the most. Now, most people will stop and say, okay, why didn't you go here to root and select lemma? Well, the reason why is because the root is really where the word is built from. The lemma is all the nuances of how the word is being used, to expand, make the compound words that come off of that root. So when I do that, I hit the hamburger menu, as most people call it, and I open this left toolbar, and I want to take three things. I want to eliminate all these words that I would think, are not important. I want to kind of take this down to three categories. And in any book of the New Testament or the Old Testament, really the three categories of most of your words come from noun, verb, and adjective. Notice how all this has just kind of, minimized down to just a few. I mean, we went from, this great collection, 15,000 words, now to 7,132. If the author in the New Testament or even in the Old Testament is using a word over and over, that is a theme. That's a theme that needs to be traced. In John's case, in the Gospel of John, everyone knows that he really likes this word believe, pisteuo in the Greek. Now, why I choose to do this concordance, if I just come to this and I've not studied John, I don't have a background in John, I'm wanting to look and see, hey, what's some of the things that John talks about the most? Look at here. I mean, we're not even in the top 10 words. You got say, tell, me, Jesus. Those are going to kind of like win the race anytime. But you come on down, you make it look at, you got judge, that's a good word to look at, krino in the Greek. But notice here, we're not even left the top 10, and John uses the word believe 101 times in the Gospel of John. I think that's significant. When you're studying John, you have to trace this idea of believe, especially when you go to John chapter 20, verses 30 and 31. He tells you why he wrote the book. And you're like, well, why did you write the book? So that you may believe. Well, you want to trace that through. And I think that's important for preachers and pastors as well, is because when you are trying to think of themes to preach on, you could just take this one theme of believe and do an expository sermon series on this idea of believe, and just break it down into categories of what this, believe looks like this, believe looks like that. And it gives you an opportunity to just look at this theme that's in the Gospel of John. Now, why did I do that? Well, the reason I did that is because I want to know what word is being used the most. This sets me up to be able to set up a visual filter to go into my Bible. Now, let's do this. Let's click the X here. We know pisteuo's there. So we're going to do this. We're going to come back and we're going to go to our documents location right here where it has the picture of the document. And we're going to click this and we're going to come over to the new selection, and we're going to go down on this list to where it says visual filter, and we're going to click that. Now, when you open visual filter, it's going to look probably like that, and you're going to be selected on Bible or books. The one that we're interested in is morph, because when you get into morph, you're dealing with the underlying layer of what Logos is building everything on. You're dealing with the original language. So, in order to fix this, we need to make sure a lot of these things here where I'm hovering my cursor is set up correctly. The first thing that I want to do is I want to name this filter, and I'm going to call it Keywords John. Okay, and then what I want to do is come here and I want to make sure that this is set correct. I want to go all morph text. Now, I don't want to go all passages because it's going to be the whole New Testament, even the Old Testament. I want to minimize this down to John. And if you don't have it, you can just type in John here. And you can actually even go like save ranges. You even have John, 1st, 2nd, 3rd John, and Revelation. But we're just going to focus in on the Gospel of John. And then what we're going to do is we're going to come right here. We're going to go into Anderson Forbes Aramaic morphology. We're wanting to go to the Logos Greek morphology. So we have all morph text in John, in your books, Logos Greek morphology. Now, remember that you have the word pisteuo. And if you start spelling the word pisteuo, it's going to just type in the first 3 letters, P-I-S. It's going to bring up this drop-down menu. And what you can do is you can see right here that you have pisteuo, believe, and that's the one that we're going to go for. Now, we click that, and then over here where it says formatting, it's going to give us an option to select a color for that word to show up. We're just going to select blue. All right. Now, you know as well as I know, you don't have to hit a save button or anything like that. You just X out of it. So we X out of it. Matter of fact, before I move further, this needs to be on New American Standard. I'm sorry I missed that step. But
I was going to ask about Bibles in general or about the NASB.
Yeah,
I didn't know. Yeah.
Yeah. So let me rephrase that. All morph text, the book of the Bible, New American Standard Bible, if that's your prioritized. Now, if you're a New King James, if you use New King, then use New King James. Logos Greek morphology, and then you have this set up. You just want to, you don't have a save button. You just exit out of it. Now, notice what happens. I'm going to go to my Bible by just clicking this Bible thing here. I'm going to expand it on my whole screen. I'm going to go to Gospel of John. Now, I want us to notice something that shows up. Notice something that shows up here on the screen. Now, if it doesn't show up on your screen, you either got the query line wrong or your visual filter turned off. Let's talk about that just for a second. So, when you come here, you have visual filters. This is going to show up in the cannonball menu. You have visual filters. Remember what we named that. We named it Keywords John. So, there we go. Now notice what happens. We come on down, we keep going down, we keep coming down, and we got all these times. Notice how it's highlighting each time this word, believe, is being used. Now, the reason that we use the root is because notice here we have a nuance of believed in past tense. We want to make sure every time that the word believe is being used. Now, I want you to take your time and look at something here. Look at verse 24. But Jesus on his part was not entrusting himself to them, for he knew all men. Now, notice how this is highlighted. Now, the question for any Bible student would be this: why is entrusted highlighted? Well, it's because if you right-click it, guess what word is being used? Pisteuo. Now, what I'm saying there is that the New American Standard decided, well, we could keep this all believed, but at this one time in John chapter 2 and verse 24, let's just change it for entrusting. Well, that makes no sense, because notice what happens here in verse 22. He started off by talking about, and they believed the scripture. Many believed in his name, but Jesus on his part was not in entrusting himself to them. Wait a minute. Wouldn't I be able to follow that theme or that context in order to understand this section of text a lot better? See, this is where Logos is so valuable, because it doesn't just use the surface text. It doesn't use the English text. It's using the base Greek text underneath. And when you utilize these visual filters, these things make it so make it so much easier to find those kind of things. Now, we got believe. Now, let's go back to our documents. We're going to go right here to the top of the list, keywords John. We're just going to go back into it. We're going to add crino.
Is that judgment?
That is the word for pass judgment on and judge. And what we're going to do here is we're going to color this orange. Now, we don't have to hit save or anything else. We know that judgment is one of those words. Now, let's just exit out of this and let's just go down into our screen and let's find the orange. Look at here. We're in chapter 3, and notice here in verse 17, for God did not send the Son into the world to judge the world. Notice here, he is not judged already. I mean, you can just tell right here with these visual filters, boom. You know, I'm starting to see these themes. I don't have to look for them. I don't have to go and read the text. They're just coming off of the page. Now, you talked about looking at charts. Let's do something real quick. Let's go into our right-click menu. Let's go into our root, right here, the square root sign. We're going to come here to search, and we're going to look at this word crino. It's just over on your right-hand side. You're going to have search. We're going to have crino. All right? Now, remember, the query line has to match what we're talking about. So it's New American Standard, all morph text, verse. Now, it's not all passages. We're going to look just specifically in the Gospel of John. So John is in there. Okay, it shows us that it's being used 113 times in 103 verses. So we have that. Notice how that crino is being used. You have answered is a way, it's a nuance of the word crino. I mean, it's a theme, you know, it's a bucket or a different semantic range of how the word crino is being used. It still has that word crino built into the word. Now, let's do something. Let's go into chart. Now, this is where it gets interesting. So the chart that I have selected is, so if you notice, when I go on here, I look at this and I have several options here on the left, and it depends on what kind of visual person you are. I want to look at bar, and on this, I want to make sure that this right here, when I come to this word root, Greek crino, I want to make sure that I see New American Standard count per chapter. And you may be saying, well, why do I want that? Well, it's because I want to see how often that word crino is being used in the Gospel of John. Now, I want us to notice John chapter 1, John chapter 2. If you keep on going down, it's in every chapter but 15. Mm-hmm. Now, as a Bible student, you know what you need to do? That should be something that should send some alarms. Like, why is it not used in 15? Keep going down, it's not used in 17. As a Bible student, that kind of pops up a question. Hey, why is it not being used in 17? Or on the flip side of that, which chapter is it being used the most? If I was going to preach a sermon on, you know, the idea of judge and the idea of judging or to pass judgment on, now, Jason, which one of these chapters would I go to preach that theme?
I'd jump to John 8.
I mean, that.
But something else to keep in mind with that, what I was just thinking was, if you're preaching any of John 8, you really ought to be talking or thinking about passing judgment or judge, right? So even if someone said, how do I understand this particular passage?
Yeah.
You think about it in context of the theme.
Yeah. Just standing back from it and saying, hey, you know, what's John 8 about? Well, Jason, it don't take a rocket scientist. John 8's got something to do with judgment. Well, how do you know? Mm-hmm. It's because John just keeps hammering that word crino over and over and over. So it kind of gives you an idea. You know, there's certain themes like love, for instance. Let's just go into this. Let's go to our visual filters. Let's create a new one just to show you how to do this again. Let's go in here and we're going to go to morph. Remember at this 3 top, we want to go all morph text. We're going to go to 1 Corinthians and we're going to select that. Your books, we're going to go New American Standard 95. We're going to go Logos Greek Morphology. And we're going to start with that word agape. Now, if you've already done the backside work that you're supposed to do from what we've talked about already, you already know that this word is agape from doing those word studies. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop that up, and I'm going to take this, and I'm going to color that red. Let's just color it pink. All right, now we want to name this key word 1 Corinthians. And we want to just exit out of it, no saving. Now, let's go to 1 Corinthians 13, the most familiar chapter that people know about the word love. Now, I can stand back from this and I never have read 1 Corinthians 13 and look, I've got love, 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 love. I mean, it's just in here all over the place. Now, what we need to do is kind of go back to what we just did on the word krino. Let's right click and let's go into this root and let's look at this search menu and let's choose this word agape, or the form of agape. So agapeo, it's just the noun form of it. So we got this. Now we want to minimize all these results because in the Bible, in the New Testament altogether, it's going to be used 320 times. We want to minimize that down to a certain book. And what we do is we come here to this query line. We go 1 Corinthians, and we want to select it. Now, I want us to look at 1 Corinthians. This is the thing that's going to kind of pop off the screen. We have all this information. Let's go to our charts real quick. And we're going to look at this. Now, if I was doing a sermon on something to do with love, what chapter would I use to preach that theme on?
This is tough. What do you think?
I mean, I believe anybody could see that. You know what I mean? It's there on the page. And that's the power of the Logos tool. I mean, think about it. The old day, you had to pull out a 3,000-pound concordance, look at that word in the concordance, look at every time, and you say, hey, you know, this is the way it's been used by this Strong's number, and I would just have to go back and do it that way. Logos just makes it so much simpler to be able to utilize this tool. I mean, I'm a visual person.
Yeah, the charts are really helpful.
And most people are visual people. I mean, so if you can just see this, I mean, but also as a Bible student, the first thing that you should be looking at, hey, I'm doing a study on 1 Corinthians. And the first question we should be asking is, hey, why isn't that word love showing up in 1 Corinthians 1? Why is it not in 3? Why is it not in 5, 6, and 7? Why is it not in 9? Why is it not in 11 and 12? I mean, so on. I mean, why is it absent from those chapters and most prevalent in chapter 13? See, those, I believe, are the right question a Bible student needs to be asking. So, let's move on to something else real quick. I want to talk about syntax graphs last, but one thing that I do want to talk about is what I call the easy button. I learned this from John Fallahy. So, whenever you have, let's say you want to set up your screen. So you have the Bible, and then let's say you have a lexicon. You can just double click and it's going to pop up a lexicon there to the right. And most people, when they do, they like to use a commentary. I'm just for demonstration purposes, I'm just going to pop up the Bible Knowledge Commentary. And what I want to do is I want to click that. And that's going to open it up here beside my Bible. What I want to do is I want to use this in the right-hand side. I'm going to drop that down so it's out of the way, kind of. Now, before we move on, one important thing that we must do, we must come to all three of these windows, go to this vertical toolbar, and click Link Set A. That way, when I'm in a certain place, it's all going to match up. All the resources are going to coordinate with one another. So link set A, and I want to make sure this one is set onto link set A. Now you're thinking, oh man, I've got this amazing setup. I've just got this amazing way to get ready to get studied. I want to save this. And ultimately, most people know that you can go to layouts and you can save it as a name layout. We're just going to call it Logos Study Layout. Now, what's fascinating is that as we say you accidentally exit out of it and you say, hey, oh man, I've lost it. You can go right here and look at that list on the left-hand side, and we'll have Logos Study Layout. Now, some people like to even make it more simpler. What I say by that is you can go to this Logos Study Layout, and you can click and drag this up to this toolbar, and it will show up in this toolbar.
It fell into a folder, did it? Or no?
Thanks.
Oh, okay, cool.
No, I don't think it did. It should have.
It just didn't make it way there.
No, it didn't make its way there. Let's do this again.
That's all right. There it is.
There it is. Now, I have a lot of things on this line, so it's not going to be on this top line, but it's right there. Now, one thing that John showed me is, hey, let's put this in a bucket. So what you would do is you would right click where it says Logos Bible Layout, and you would name the folder name. We're just going to put it in that Bible study folder that's already been created. Now, if you don't have Bible study folder created, once you put a name for this folder, it's going to create it automatically. It's going to put it on the top line or on the left side. So we're going to name this Bible Study because I've already got one created. I'm just going to click off to the side. Now look here. When I go here, it's no longer there. But when I come here to Bible Study, guess what? Logos Study Layout is in that section. Now, you can do, say you're doing outlining or doing word studies or doing certain things, and you want to save those outlines, and you want to kind of like develop a method. Hey, step 1, step 2, this is what I like to do. You could do that, and you can create this, put it all in that folder. So you have that layout. Look there. I don't have to go over to layouts and go through the mix and say, which layout was it? No, I can go right here. I can go to Bible Study, Logo Study Layout. I've already got it. Boom. It's there on my screen.
Do you know how, and I just caught this, so it might be helpful to you. Do you know how to move, if you open Bible Study folder once again?
So
how to move one up to the top? So observation.
So I don't think you can move it unless you know.
Is that right?
Yeah.
No, I don't know either.
Yeah,
I was
I don't think you can move it. It's in there because, it's alphabetizing it. Notice 02, 03.
Yeah, I see.
So that's what it's doing. It's alphabetizing. Hey, Logos, Logo Study Layout. Hey, it starts with an L. Hey, this is, my layout for doing studies. Now, when you come here, you got this word love.
Really
I mean, look, I've got on the right, since I've linked all my panels, I've got on the right, I have my word study, and on the right down below it, I have my commentary of choice. And like I said, I just use Bible Knowledge Commentary as an example of demonstration. So now, I mean, think about where we've been. Just in just a little bit of time, I was able to take you from, hey, this is what the software looks like when you start it, when you first buy it. We've taken you to, hey, this is some things I think it makes the tool a little more easier. It's like taking this, would you rather use the old time saw versus the powered saw? Obviously the double click, and then we've taken it a little bit further. We've looked at prioritizing resources, and what we did, we set those up into like some categories. And we could have went into collections and made a whole collection and things like that, but we didn't spend time with that. Maybe it's something we can do at a later date. But
deal.
And then you have on the right hand side, you know, you have, we set it up. We made it user friendly. We said, hey, New American Standard, New King James, those are my two top Bibles. I set up my little category of, I just listed all my Greek lexicons. Underneath that, my Hebrew lexicons, and now I'm ready to go. And we've utilized that. And now notice, I mean, look at, we went from being able not to use it to being able to use it. We've looked at visual filters and how that can be effective in tracing themes throughout a book. I mean, we're taking things that can take up to 40 hours and we're minimizing those things down to somewhat, you know, 5 to 6, 7 hours a week. I mean, it's all about time, especially in full-time ministry. If you know, if time is something that is always seems like you never have enough of in full-time ministry. So, you know, we're taking the study time and we're utilizing that. It's not like we're not getting the same material. We're just getting the material much faster.